Good evening, folks. It is Saturday, and you are watching The Nonprofits. This is our last segment for this week, and we are going to discuss something that I would consider delusional if I were to refer to yesterday's segment. I don't think anybody can present this next article without uncovering some delusion, but who cares what I think? Kelly Laughlin is here to take us away. Kelly?
Thanks, Jimmy. The leader of the infamous Focus on Family, Jim Daly, has written a hit piece on the left for Fox News. In a gloating diatribe, he claims the left is just a bunch of whiners that can't get over losing the election. But as I recall, it was the right that had more hysterical fits than I see coming from the left today, including still 4 years later claiming the election was stolen without, of course, providing any proof to back that up. Now, what Mr. Daly seems to have forgotten is that this country is for all Americans, not just Christian nationalists. And as he revels in his victory, he characterizes the left as crazy and unhinged. But what it seems like he's really saying is, screw all you people if you aren't a Christian, because we are in power now, and we will use the government to steamroll a religious right agenda. And there's nothing you can do about it if you have other religious beliefs or non-beliefs. This story is, as I said, by Jim Daly from Fox News, published November 17th, 2024.
Yeah, excellent. I see a lot of similarities between this article and the article that we covered earlier this week on Monday. Kelly, you brought it up and nailed it. This guy threatening to steamroll democratic policies or democratic, sectors of the government with a right-wing agenda. We saw that affecting the education system. And when I said that on Monday, I said, man, I have to chuckle anytime I see somebody on the right, having a problem with LGBTQ or gender studies. And in the same token, again, we find ourselves saying to members on the right, are you out of your mind? Calling the left hysterical? Nobody's making gallows or taking a crap on a desk in the Capitol building that they forced their way into, right? And so, I have to wonder, is this just more delusion? And, Aaron, I want to start with you. In the context of this article, in the context of the election that we went through and the change that we're about to see, do some Americans have a right to be hysterical?
Absolutely. I think they have a right to be hysterical. This election was not for the people that are hysterical, for the liberal tears that are being shed. It's not about the fucking policies. It's not about the fucking platforms, right? It's about patriotism to our Constitution and loyalty to the rule of law. Mm-hmm. What happened was so far beyond policies. There's on a recent episode of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. John Oliver made the joke that right now, not talking about policies is a little like trying to choose a paint color for your walls while your house is burning down. That's where all the liberal hysterical tears are coming from, is the fact that we just elected someone who blatantly broke his vow to protect and defend the Constitution and the rule of law. That has
poured gas all over and holding the match to burn the house down.
That
right?
literally tried to get his vice president killed. That literally tried to ask his vice president to overturn the results of a fair and secure election, and has spread lies to such an extent that 1/3 of Americans believe the 2020 election was stolen when there is no evidence that it was stolen. That's where the liberal tears are coming from. It's not about policies. It's about the loss of liberty. It's about the loss of individual freedom. It's about the loss of the Constitution, which ushered in an era of democracy and peace into the world. It's about disregarding for that, where people decided, well, I don't think the rule of law is that important. I think the economy is more important. I think these policies are more important. That's where people are hysterical, in my opinion. That's where I was at. That's what really hurt me, was just the lack of disregard for the Constitution and the rule of law that this election demonstrated.
Yeah,
I honestly, I never thought Trump would ever get elected again just for that reason. I always thought, hey, you know what? I understood why people wanted to give him a chance in 2016.
Sure.
I understood. Hey, a new guy, an outsider. I didn't agree with his policies, but let's give him a chance. But he so clearly demonstrated through that
I gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, I
can't believe it.
I think, yeah, and maybe you're even a little bit hysterical right now. And I think you have a right to be. And it's not just the Constitution that I think people are concerned about, although that is, if you had a single issue that you were concerned about, the Constitution or the disregard, the lack of regard that Aaron mentioned, is certainly a good enough reason to be concerned. But I mean, let's talk about all of the other laws. You know, there were felonies, right? We have for the first time in our history, a president-elect who is a convicted felon and was found liable for sexual assault. These are alarming for a lot of Americans from all walks of life. And so, I think that for people on the right to point the finger at leftists, quote unquote, for having a concern over the rule of law being violated, when the people on the right actively violated the law for the reasons that they're accusing the left of, is complete hypocrisy. And, you know, I think I want to go to Kelly about this, because I know you introduced the article, right? And you covered it a little bit, but, you know, my first thought was, wait a minute, conservatives don't get upset when their candidate loses? I mean, what the hell am I missing? And Kelly, could you please expand on that?
Oh, they don't even need to have their candidate lose. They can get upset about all kinds of crazy things. I think the author forgot about everyone shooting Bud Light cans, burning their Nikes, beating their Keurigs with a baseball bat. Those are all things I remember the right doing, just over stuff that they didn't like. Oh my God, Nike came out and said the LGBTQ people were okay. Let's burn our shoes. I mean, people, why would you burn something that you already spent money in? How is that hurting Nike company? It doesn't make any sense at all. It reminded me of the 60s when Beatles record sales went up so high because people were buying them just to burn them at church. So I don't, it just seems silly to me.
I did not know that.
Wow. Yo, you didn't know that? Yeah, that actually happened. And one of the things that really got me about this was that the author decides to quote 2 Democrats, only 2 that he can find. Yeah. And one is totally embroiled in ethical issues. And honestly, if he had run back in, say, 1980, he would have been a Republican. And the other one only disagrees with the left on one issue only, trans rights. And that issue is, and what he said is that issue is hurting the Democrats at the ballot box. He didn't say he was against trans rights, just that it was hurting Democrats at the ballot box. So,
yeah.
Go ahead. I was going to say he does quote one other person, Chuck Colson. I don't know if anybody knows who Chuck Colson was. He was Nixon's hatchet man, went to prison over the Watergate scandal. So I think it's really funny that, like, of the 3 people he quotes, one really doesn't agree with him, and the other 2 are apparently criminals. So you'd think he could find better people to prove his point, right?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of I think there are a lot of criminals that the right can point to nowadays, right? Especially with some cabinet picks, people who just came out of jail, people who have problems with sexual assault. I don't know how you can have that problem and still be considered for a cabinet, let alone be elected to office. But that is a kind of a different.
You can get drunk at work and be in charge of the button.
Yeah, right. So we are in a bit of a debacle. And as we have talked about we talk about all the time on this show, but as we have talked about earlier in this week, the relationship between religion and government, I want to turn to Eli and his opinion about secular and religious beliefs. You mentioned, leading up to this show that secular and religious beliefs do have the same cognitive foundation. So I want to unpack that a little, see if you want to expand.
Yeah. So, and that's just a remnant from yesterday's show where we talked about how beliefs and delusions basically come from the same place in our brain. So, Daly says here at one point, from abortion fanaticism to policies that celebrate sexual confusion, radicals practice their political ideology with religious zeal and fervor, basically comparing saying, well, secularism is a religion too. And so what you're referring to is where we know that based on kind of what we learned yesterday about beliefs having the same origin, whether they're true or delusional, secular and religious beliefs do have the same cognitive origin or foundation, but one of them is lacking a critical ingredient or supplement, and that is, experimental evidence or like just some objectively true thing to like support it. So when you have things like, he says, he says things like the reason you are upset because, upset about your candidate losing, or the reason you're upset about the election results is because you're not close enough to God, not because like you're part of a marginalized group that is, constantly being targeted by, this party that now has complete control over all three branches, not because your healthcare is at risk, you're at risk of losing access to healthcare, not because, you're homosexual and you enjoy being married and, living your life and just being the person that you are, but just because you're not focused on God enough. And it's this idea that he's saying that all of those things are not important. Like those things just don't matter. That like you're saying that's why you're upset about the election, or the results, the reasons that Aaron gave are I hadn't even thought of, but valid reasons as well. And what Daly is saying is like, that's what you're telling us is the reason, but the real reason is because you don't love Jesus enough. And I think that is absolutely delusional.
Yeah. There are some other delusions too. I mean, the right for some reason thinks that the left has a trans agenda. That their plan is to like have transgender people take over schools and the country and the government. I've seen this on far right shows. And speaking about Aaron's points, I want to ask Aaron. Aaron, is the idea of a trans agenda overblown? Why is this the issue that the right chooses to embolden their base? And so yeah. Did you want to expand on that?
I would. The only reason people tag on an issue is because it gets their base, it gets them elected, it gives them power, right? If it wasn't an issue that got them elected, they wouldn't harp on it, right? If they were losing votes because of it, they would stop harping on it. There's no trans agenda on the left. All the left is doing with trans is we're listening to people. We believe them when they share their experiences about their gender. We listen to people that study this kind of thing, and we believe what the experts are saying, that gender is a spectrum. Gender isn't a binary. It isn't left and right. It's a spectrum. It is also a social construct. That means we make it up as a culture, as a group of people in this country. We make up what gender means. We make up what it means to be a man. We make up what it means to be a woman. And when you make that up, why can't someone who was born one way feel a different way and vice versa, right? So the only people with an agenda are the right. The whole point of this guy's article seems to be, I'm getting the theocracy I want. What's your guys' problem?
Yeah.
Right. And his arguments against the left seem to be just projections about the very things that he and the right are doing. They're the ones that have created the transgender issue, right? They're the ones being dogmatic about things, and they're accusing the left of being dogmatic, but they're the ones that are saying, oh no, there can only be man, woman. That's dogmatic. That's an agenda. That's agenda.
Because they won the abortion issue, right?
And so, but unfortunately, their policies lead to people dying. When you don't give transgender people the care they need, people die. When you when you limit access to abortion, women die. And I just don't understand why people can't see that.
Yeah.
But the policies on the left of allowing access to abortion, allowing access to transgender care, that helps people live and be and stay alive.
Yeah, and the reason I bring up the transgender issue is because, you know, there is some fanaticism, just like Eli was talking about with the abortion fanaticism. Like there is fanaticism over sexuality for some reason on the right. Probably because there's such similarities between conservative thinking and religion, you know, which is obsessed with sexuality, that it kind of just comes out in their politics. You know, I think this is kind of like beating a dead horse at this point. You know, what is it going to take to get people to realize that Christianity or religion in general in government is resulting in this hatred? And Kelly, you know, not to pick on you, not to be an ageist, but you talked about Beatles albums being burned in churches, right, in the 60s. Yeah. So have we improved? Or what is going on?
No, we've gotten worse. We go through, you know, people talk about the Satanic Panic of the 80s, right? That wasn't the first Satanic Panic. That we had a huge one in the 1890s that resulted in alcohol being illegalized, right? Science funding was just pretty much stopped in America at that point because of religious fervor. So that was really against the social issue, right? Drinking. That was the big Satanic Panic then. Few years go by, 80s roll up, and now we're going to go against games, D&D games, rock and roll music. We're looking at things again, right? And now we're in another Satanic Panic, let's face it. And this time it's not about a thing, it's about people, right? So as savage as the last two panics were against the subject of the panic, if that kind of animosity gets pulled over towards people, those people are in a very dangerous situation, right? This is unlike any other crazy religious fervor we've had before. And here's this guy, president of Focus on Family. Everybody know National Day of Prayer? That got started by Focus on Family. This is a guy saying, this is what we need to have. This is what we're going to do. We're now in charge of the government. And in a way, you know, I hate to boil it down to like one issue or something like this, but when I was going to the ballot box this November, one of the things I was thinking is I have to vote for genocide against the LGBTQ community, or I have to vote for genocide against Palestinians. And I was, you know, how do you judge? How do you decide what you're going to do when you got that to choose from? Yeah. So I had to go with trying to save the person on my block instead of the person on the other side of the world. So,
well, you know, it's not that simple. I mean, I know that you.
No, I know it's not. I know it's not. But it's just like that's in a way that gets the way it boiled down to me in a way that this
right.
Is
but you could have removed that. You could have removed that conflict completely and had a completely different conflict that stood out as profound. For example, for me, it was do I vote for the people who value law and order? Or do I vote for the people who think it's okay to lie about an election and overthrow the government, knowing full well that there are other issues on the table that I need to consider?
And sexually assault women.
It only needs to be a one issue. You know, that's how serious it is. And anyway, as I digress a little bit, but not really. I mean, I think I'm circling back to the point of the topic. We've got people who are hysterical on both sides, where I think one is completely reasonable and the other is completely unreasonable. And I'll let you gentlemen decide which is reasonable, which is not. Well, who's getting ascribed what in that scenario? But I want to do a final lightning round with each of you. I'll go Aaron, Kelly, Eli. So Aaron, what do you got?
I think the deep rot in the Republican Party is the absolute hypocrisy of their position.
Absolute hypocrisy.
The absolute hypocrisy.
Absolute hypocrisy.
In everything they say, everything they support. If anybody remembers the 90s when Clinton was president, and the awful things the Republicans would say about Clinton because of his sexual proclivities and his actions, how he was unfit for office. And now look where we're at. And we don't get that same. There's just they should be absolutely
now it's
not
a criteria,
voting, right? People on Fox News should be like, this guy's not fit for office because that's what we said against Clinton. He's worse than Clinton sexually. So we have to be, no, there's just no, all that matters is having power, being in control. The ends justifies the means. And it's the hypocrisy that drives me hysterical.
All right. Thank you very much, Kelly.
Yeah, that you're so right there. And I hate to see younger people flocking to that hypocrisy, but a lot of these kids have already been indoctrinated to it because of religion. How much of that hypocrisy do we see in religion too? So it just becomes like a part of life. You just accept it. And we've become more and more accepting of people saying one thing and then doing another. And I think that's been a really, really big problem in our country. That's about all I got. So,
Eli.
I'm at the point anymore, kind of along the lines of what you were saying, Kelly, or with both of you were saying. Not really surprised anymore when, people in power do or don't go through with things they did or didn't say they would or wouldn't do. I'm just like, that tracks. I'm fully prepared to buy it, bought it, paper. It's just, one of those things we're so accustomed to. We know that this system is fucked, and we're just like, it's kind of that way, and it's really just sort of disheartening when you think about it.
I'm wondering when is rock bottom?
Yeah,
I fear that we're going to find out, because
what's going to have to happen to get people to vote. You
know what, Kelly's the person to answer that question. Rock bottom, right?
It's right. It's right there.
So checks and balances my ass. Okay. Checks and balances my ass. What happens when all three branches of the government coalesce, right? They acquiesce with each other's agenda. And we've not seen that before to the scale that we have. The United States.
That's why we're hysterical.
That's right. That is right. That is exactly right. And the people who have control of all three branches are not, right? And
I got to say though,
I
was heartened by the fact that 2 cabinet picks were checked by the Senate and they've already withdrawn. So maybe there is a little bit of hope here.
Hopefully,
some good thinking still. So.
This opens up a can of worms, and I just need to point out 2 things, right? So one, I wanted to say that the single greatest failure of our Constitution is the Supreme Court. Okay, we're on a topic, right, where I think it's appropriate to mention that, because the Supreme Court was deliberately designed in such a way that they would not be politicized, and that is exactly the opposite of what's happening. So. Yep. Complete failure, right? It's actually allowing for the checks and balances to fail. 2. We have got a private citizen, Elon Musk, threatening the arrest of Democrats in office and threatening to fund primaries for anybody that does not go along with the president-elect's agenda. That is incredibly dangerous. The richest man in the world has essentially bought himself a kingship in the most powerful country in the world, with the most powerful military and the largest economy. And it's an awful thing to think about. So where is rock bottom, Aaron? I think we're pretty damn close. I think we are pretty damn close.
I thought that where we were in 2020, my friend.
Yep.
That's where I thought we were in 2020.
And it unfortunately is not going in the right direction. So
what I'm doing to manage is, I'm a lover of sci-fi and fantasy, and you can't get very far in sci-fi and fantasy without getting some really good apocalyptic movies and TV shows and books, or post-apocalyptic. So and for whatever reason, there's part of our brains that just love apocalyptic stuff. Yeah. So the way I'm managing is, I'm just connecting with that part of myself, and I'm popping popcorn, and I'm watching the apocalypse, and I'm enjoying the coming apocalypse. I know that sounds crazy, but that's what I'm doing.
Well, I'm not going to be party to that. I hope
I'm still here working, trying to change things.
Yeah.
But to cope, I'm connecting to my love of apocalypses.
I am foolishly gonna put my faith, if you will, in the American people and hope they do the right thing if push comes to shove. I want to say one more thing. I'm sorry. We mentioned earlier in the week an article where, and I like to remind people of this, our vice president-elect did, in fact, one time call President-elect Trump the Adolf Hitler of our time. You know, just today, I saw a clip that was released by the potential Department of Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, the Fox News anchor, completely eviscerating Donald Trump. And the only reason I bring that up is because I want to highlight Aaron's point about the hypocrisy and really show another example of the hypocrisy that this article uncovers. And with that, folks, thank you for tuning in with us. It has been a great week. Go back, check out our other articles, our other shows that we've done. And don't forget to stay tuned into the nonprofits. Thanks again.